everything is fake. And so I really think that authenticity is going to become our new currency. Don't mind the kangaroos in the background, but this is day 1 of 15 days to overcome my imposter syndrome. And this series is exactly what it says on the tin. I'm going to take you along on my afternoon walks every day for 15 days, speaking about a topic that I'm passionate about. And so why should you care if I overcome my imposter syndrome and learn to speak my truth? Well, first of all, you may have clicked on this video because you have imposter syndrome and you want to overcome this condition. Or maybe you don't even know what imposter syndrome is. So let's start there. So, imposter syndrome is a condition that has to do with knowledge and with your position in life. So people who have this usually feel like they don't belong and they haven't earned the status or the position that they've gotten to. And it is only a matter of time until they're found out. The concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect also plays into this a little bit, where the Dunning-Kruger effect is like a curve. So you have someone starts learning about a certain topic and then becomes overly confident with what they know. And then comes the curve where it goes down and they actually start to realize that this whole thing is a lot more complicated than they initially believed. And so their confidence in this topic, or in whatever it is they're doing, wanes. So the curve is now down here, and that is where people with imposter syndrome tend to linger, right? So interestingly enough, imposter syndrome was first diagnosed in highly achieving women. And today it's common knowledge that anyone can have imposter syndrome at any age and any time, any gender. But it is very common in women. And so people who have imposter syndrome are actually people who are experts on a certain topic and actually know an awful lot. And instantly my imposter syndrome goes like, are you calling yourself an expert? Who do you think you are? You know, how dare you? But what does worry me is that people with imposter syndrome don't speak up, and that's how we end up missing out on very important voices in a conversation. And that's why I think it's so important that we tackle this. So how do I know that I have imposter syndrome? Well, it's usually whenever I think about sharing my opinion, be that in a conversation with real people in real life or on the internet, the first thought that comes to mind is, who do you think you are? That's the first question. Who do you think you are talking about this? And it's up to the point where it's really becoming an obstacle for me. And I'll tell you more about that later. But to understand how I developed imposter syndrome, it's important to understand my story. So today I am a fantasy author. I live in Western Australia in a remote cabin, but I'm originally from Germany, where I worked as a TV producer. I've written a lot of books, and for my research I have traveled the world. I have worked as a safari guide for a few years in Southern Africa, and so I've been around the block, so to speak, and I have met a lot of different people from all walks of life, and I've interviewed a lot of people I've guided a lot of people on the safaris. And there was this one thing. I mean, there were a lot of things that I noticed, I'm sure, but there was this one common thread that I started to pick up whenever I interviewed people, whenever I guided people. And that was that a lot of times people would talk about a certain topic, assuming that the other person, the person they were talking to, knew less about the topic than they do. And so I really started to notice this, and it would often lead to like awkward moments, or I also thought it was like kind of rude, not just when talking to me, I don't really care, but you know, when someone talks to someone else and they just assume the other person doesn't know anything. And so, for example, there was one safari where a guy talked about Cape Town to another person, telling them all the stories and what they knew about the place, and the other person was from Cape Town, so it was quite awkward. So anyway, this behavior really became a mirror for myself, because I wasn't always quiet about topics. I was a lot more confident, especially as a teenager and throughout my 20s. And so I realized that, oh my God, if they are doing that, I'm probably doing that too. So I started to, and this became my mantra, I started to make it a habit that whenever I met a new person that I didn't know, talking to a stranger, I would always assume that the other person knew more than I did. So to me that was kind of like a form of respect, you know what I mean? It was like we meet on a level playing field, and no matter how someone looks like, wherever they come from, whatever, I would always assume that person is at least as clever as me, or even more clever, you see? And that's how the problem started, because I really internalized this. Whenever I'd meet someone, I would assume that I'm the one who knows less. And I think that was a mistake. Because yes, you should meet on a level playing field and treat other people with that respect. But you also need to treat yourself with respect. And assuming you know less is disrespectful towards yourself. So that's how it started, but that wasn't the only reason why I developed imposter syndrome. A lot of it came from my time in Southern Africa, working in the safari industry, where I became increasingly interested in topics such as animal welfare or conservation, and those are very complex topics. Like, even people who work in those industries and have worked in those fields all their lives tread very carefully when talking about this, because they know there isn't just one truth. They are still at the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger curve, you know. They're very careful what they say, because they know there are no easy answers. And as a result, I stopped talking about those topics. As a consequence, I also stopped talking about anything at all. And this is now up to the point where it's really affecting my work. Like, I struggle to publish my books, or I can never reread my own books afterwards. So yeah, it's becoming a problem. And you might ask now, why I even bother doing this, filming myself and putting it on the internet if I have this issue? Well, I want to get rid of it. And it also has a lot to do with my line of work. And my line of work is changing. So we are now waist deep into the digital age where anything can be copied at the click of a button. And everything is fake. And so I really think that authenticity is going to become our new currency. And I think you're going to find in the future, you're going to find a lot more people like me turning towards YouTube, or finding other ways to share their authentic self. Introverted artists who want to show the artist behind the art and want to tell the story of how and why they create this thing that they created. And I think that's a good thing. And I might talk about that in another video. I do think we all had enough of the fakeness, and I think we're yearning for authenticity. And I noticed that as a consumer myself, I gravitate towards YouTube. I gravitate towards realness and away from anything sort of scripted. So, and that is why I'm doing this. If I feel this as a consumer, I feel like I should show up like this as the creator. But so this does come with another problem that only deepens my imposter syndrome, and that is that the internet is a scary fucking place. The internet is a very mean, scary place where anyone can just voice their opinions about you anonymously, and I'm scared. I'm scared to be criticized. It doesn't feel safe to be criticized, and I'm scared of hate or shitstorms, you know. No one wants that. But I am a storyteller, and so as storytellers, it is our job to share our perspective, to share our views of the world, and to do so using whatever medium is currently the best to do so. So back in the day, that might have been newspaper, then it was television, it was books, and now it's the internet. And as of May 2025, I believe it is YouTube. And so the last thing why I suffer from imposter syndrome is, or I suffer to speak my truth, is literally because of the way I speak. I am originally from Germany. I'm an author and I write in English. And so when I'm speaking, I tend to make mistakes, right? Because I'm just saying things as they come to me in my head, and sometimes there's half a bit of German in there and I might use the wrong word, and so I'm probably a bit too hard on myself, right? Trying to get everything perfect. Because in my head, if someone notices that I make a mistake while I'm speaking, why would they then buy my book? You know what I mean? Which is silly, and I know that. Like, I obviously have editors and proofreaders, and I have a lot more control with the written word. I'm much better with the written word anyway. But yeah, the more I look into imposter syndrome, the more I think that this is something we need to overcome, those of us who have this, because I worry that otherwise we miss out on important voices. So we can't let the fear win, you know what I mean? I have this weird thing where I always tend to go where the fear is. A bit masochistic of me, I suppose, but so I always do the thing that I'm most scared of. And so this is where the fear is right now. And so I just have to move through the fear. And I'm doing this for myself, but also for you. And if this video aims to do one thing, it is to encourage you to speak your truth and to work through this thing with me, if you like. I'll be here for the next now 14 days talking about a variety of topics, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Maybe it's a good thing that I no longer feel like I have anything to prove, and that I don't want to make a living anymore. I want to make a life.